It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Leonard walked the length of the parking lot, moving to park one of the company executive's cars. His uniform, though worn, was clean, and his demeanor was calm and focused. He had worked as a valet for years, always ensuring that every car was parked with the utmost care. Today was no different. Suddenly, a group of employees entered the garage. Young, confident men and women with freshly printed business degrees. They were interns, hired for their promise and ambition, but some of them carried an air of entitlement that was hard to ignore. Leonard was just parking a sleek black SUV when he heard a snicker behind him. "Hey, valet boy, you better not scratch that car. It's probably worth more than your yearly salary," one of the young women, Katie Green, said, her voice dripping with arrogance. Her colleagues burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the otherwise quiet garage. Leonard didn't respond. He simply finished parking, taking extra care to ensure that the SUV was positioned perfectly in the space. He walked back toward the entryway, his head held high, pretending not to hear their taunts. He had faced this kind of treatment before, people who judged him based on his uniform, on the fact that he was a valet and not an executive in a suit. It wasn't new, but it always stung. As Leonard moved towards the next car, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the SUV's tinted window. He paused for a moment, taking in the tired but determined man looking back at him. He had worked hard his entire life, and he knew the value of his work, even if others didn't. He had nothing to prove to these young professionals, and he wasn't about to let their words ruin his day. Katie and her group continued walking, still laughing and talking among themselves, completely unaware of the man they had just belittled. To them, Leonard was invisible, just another service worker they passed on their way to the office. But Leonard knew better. He knew that respect wasn't about the clothes you wore or the job title you held, it was about how you treated others, regardless of their status. Leonard took a deep breath, letting the moment pass. He turned his focus back to his work, determined to do his job with the same level of care and pride as he always had. No one could take that away from him. Katie wasn't done. She smirked at her friends and made a point of calling Leonard over. "Hey, you!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the parking garage. Leonard turned, his face a mask of politeness, hiding the frustration bubbling under the surface. "Yes, ma'am," he asked, his tone measured and respectful. Katie's lips curled into a smirk. She took a few steps toward him, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. "Be careful with my car, all right? If I find even a scratch, I'll make sure you're out of here," she threatened, flipping her long hair over her shoulder as if to emphasize her importance. The rest of the group laughed at Leonard's expense, treating him like nothing more than an errand boy. They made no effort to hide their amusement, and Leonard could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his reaction. He merely nodded, his expression neutral. "Of course, ma'am. I'll take good care of it," he replied, his voice steady. Katie rolled her eyes, turning back to her friends. "Can you believe these guys? Acting like they're doing us a favor," she scoffed, her voice loud enough for Leonard to hear. The group chuckled, clearly entertained by the situation. Leonard could feel the heat rising in his face, but he kept his composure. He'd dealt with their type many times before, young, entitled, and unaware of the struggles of those around them, but something about today felt different. Leonard took the keys from Katie, his fingers brushing against the cold metal as he tried to keep his emotions in check. He walked over to her car, a shiny red convertible, and opened the door carefully. As he slid into the driver's seat, he heard more laughter echoing behind him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. He had a job to do, and he wasn't about to let a few thoughtless comments get in the way of that. As Leonard started the car and began to maneuver it through the garage, he couldn't help but think about how different his life had turned out compared to what he had once hoped for. He had dreams, aspirations that went far beyond the concrete walls of the parking garage. But life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges his way, and over time, those dreams had shifted. He found himself here, working hard every day to provide for his family, to make an honest living. He wasn't ashamed of his job, he took pride in it. But it was moments like these that reminded him of the divide between people, the way some saw others as beneath them. After parking the car, Leonard stepped out and walked back toward the group, handing the keys back to Katie. She took them without a word of thanks, her eyes already focused on something else. "Good," she said dismissively, as if he were nothing more than an inconvenience. One of Katie's friends, a young man named Brian, decided to chime in. "You know, Katie, maybe we should give him a tip," he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin, holding it up for everyone to see. "Here you go, man. Don't spend it all in one place," he said, tossing the coin towards Leonard. The coin hit the ground with a metallic clink, rolling to a stop near Leonard's feet. Leonard looked at it for a moment, his face betraying nothing. He bent down, picked it up, and straightened. He held the coin between his fingers, then looked Brian in the eye. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice calm, though the humiliation of the gesture burned inside him. Brian smirked, clearly enjoying the reaction. "No problem, man. Just trying to help," he said, turning back to the group, who were all laughing again. Leonard watched them for a moment, then turned and walked back to his station. He could still hear their laughter as they moved toward the building, their voices fading as they disappeared from sight. Leonard took a deep breath, trying to let the moment wash over him. He had dealt with people like this before, but today the sting felt sharper. Maybe it was the way Katie had looked at him, as if he were less than human, or maybe it was the laughter, the casual cruelty of it all. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to lose his temper, not here, not now. He looked down at the coin in his hand, the small piece of metal that Brian had tossed at him as if it were a joke. Leonard considered throwing it away, but instead, he slipped it into his pocket. He would keep it, not as a reminder of the humiliation, but as motivation. He knew he was worth more than the way they treated him. He knew that his value wasn't determined by his job or by the uniform he wore. As he stood there, taking in the quiet of the now empty garage, Leonard thought about his family. His wife, who worked tirelessly to support their children, and his kids, who looked up to him with admiration. They were the reason he kept going, the reason he endured days like today. He knew he couldn't let the actions of a few entitled interns define him or dictate his worth. Just as he was lost in thought, another car pulled into the garage, snapping Leonard back to reality. He straightened his uniform, took a deep breath, and put on his professional smile. The car came to a stop, and the window rolled down, revealing another executive who greeted Leonard with a polite nod. "Morning, Leonard. Can you take care of this for me?" the man asked, his tone respectful. Leonard nodded, grateful for the small kindness. "Of course, sir," he replied, taking the keys. As he got into the car, he allowed himself a moment to breathe, to let go of the tension that had built up. He reminded himself that not everyone was like Katie and her friends. There were still people who treated others with respect, regardless of their position. As he drove the car to its designated spot, Leonard made a promise to himself. He would not let the mockery of a few define his day. He would continue to work with pride, to hold his head high, and to show his children that dignity wasn't about what others thought of you. It was about knowing your own worth, even when others tried to diminish it. Leonard parked the car and stepped out, his resolve stronger than ever. He walked back to his station, ready to face whatever the day had in store for him. He knew that there would always be people like Katie and Brian, but he also knew that their actions said more about them than they ever would about him. And that knowledge gave him the strength to keep going, no matter what. Katie Green and her colleagues were oblivious to the fact that Leonard wasn't just a regular valet. He had been a quiet figure at Monarch Industries for years, not only parking cars but silently observing everything that unfolded at the company, from the boardrooms to the lunchrooms, from casual conversations to heated discussions. Leonard knew more about Monarch than many of the executives sitting comfortably in their leather chairs. Leonard's job gave him access to a unique perspective. He was always there, silently watching, listening, and learning. He knew who arrived early and who stayed late, who treated their assistants with kindness and who barked orders without a second thought. He saw the deals made in hushed tones in the parking garage, the kind that never made it into official reports. Monarch Industries was a sprawling empire, a giant in its field, but Leonard had seen the cracks that ran through its foundation, the egos of its leaders, the vulnerabilities of its middle managers, and the cutthroat politics that defined everyday life at the office. It was why he had stayed for so long, working diligently, never drawing attention to himself. He had watched the company grow, seen executives come and go, and witnessed how decisions made in the comfort of the boardroom impacted the people on the ground. He watched how employees like Katie, fresh out of college with their business degrees, strutted into the building without a care in the world, their eyes filled with ambition but blind to the reality of the world around them. Leonard had seen it all, the power plays, the alliances, the betrayals. He remembered when Monarch had nearly lost a major client because of an executive's carelessness. Leonard had overheard a conversation in the parking garage, a heated argument between two managers who thought no one was listening. They had been scrambling to fix the mess, unaware that Leonard, quietly parking cars nearby, had connections that could help. He had made a call, reached out to an old friend, and within days the situation was under control. The executives had celebrated their supposed success, completely unaware of the role Leonard had played in saving their reputations. It wasn't just the big moments that Leonard noticed. He saw the small things too, like the way Katie always seemed to laugh a little too loudly when she was with her colleagues, trying to fit in, trying to prove herself. He saw the insecurity behind her arrogance, the fear that perhaps she wasn't as capable as she wanted everyone to believe. Leonard understood that her mockery of him was a way to mask her own insecurities, to establish her place among her peers. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it made it easier for Leonard to understand. But Leonard wasn't just observing for the sake of curiosity. He had a reason for staying at Monarch, a reason for watching and waiting. He had seen the way the company treated people, not just valets like him, but employees at every level. He had watched as hardworking men and women were passed over for promotions because they didn't fit the right image, as talented individuals were pushed out because they dared to challenge the status quo. Leonard had stayed because he knew that one day he might have the opportunity to do something about it. He had spent years gathering information, quietly documenting the things he saw and heard. He knew about the shady deals, the unethical practices that were hidden behind layers of bureaucracy. He knew which executives were cutting corners, which managers were mistreating their teams, and which deals were made with a wink and a handshake instead of a contract. Leonard had a mental archive of every injustice he had witnessed, every secret that Monarch Industries thought was buried. And he was waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity to use what he knew. He wasn't looking for revenge. Leonard didn't want to hurt anyone. But he did want to see change. He wanted to see a company like Monarch held accountable, to see the people at the top realize that their actions had consequences. He wanted to make sure that the people who worked hard, who did their jobs with integrity, were treated with the respect they deserved. As Leonard continued his work that day, parking cars and enduring the taunts from Katie and her friends, he kept his emotions in check. They had no idea who he really was or what he was capable of. To them, he was just a valet, someone whose name they didn't bother to learn. But Leonard knew that his role at Monarch was far more important than they could ever imagine. He thought back to a conversation he had overheard just a few weeks ago, a conversation between two senior executives discussing a merger that would result in massive layoffs. They had spoken casually, as if the livelihoods of hundreds of employees were nothing more than numbers on a balance sheet. Leonard had listened, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. He knew that the employees had no idea what was about to happen, that they would be blindsided by the announcement. It was moments like these that reminded Leonard why he had stayed, why he had endured the mockery and the dismissiveness. He was gathering the truth, piece by piece, and one day he would make sure it was heard. As the day went on, Leonard watched Katie and her colleagues from a distance. They moved through the parking garage, laughing and joking, completely unaware of the man who watched them, the man who knew more about Monarch Industries than they ever would. Leonard knew their type: ambitious, confident, eager to prove themselves. He didn't begrudge them their ambition, but he wished they understood that true success wasn't about stepping on others to get ahead. It was about lifting others up, about recognizing the value in every person, regardless of their title or position. Leonard finished his shift that day with the same quiet determination he always had. He handed over the keys, nodded politely to the next valet coming in for the evening shift, and made his way to the employee locker room. As he changed out of his uniform, he thought about the files he had at home, documents, recordings, evidence that painted a picture of the real Monarch Industries. He had been careful, meticulous, ensuring that everything he gathered was backed up, that it couldn't be easily dismissed or ignored. He knew that the day was coming when he would have to make a choice, when he would have to decide whether to step out of the shadows and reveal what he knew. It wasn't a decision he took lightly. He had a family to think about, people who depended on him. But Leonard also knew that he couldn't stay silent forever. The truth mattered, and the people who worked at Monarch deserved to know what was really happening behind the scenes. Leonard took a deep breath as he left the locker room, the weight of his knowledge pressing heavily on his shoulders. He walked out of the building, the cool evening air a welcome relief after the stuffy garage. He looked back at the towering structure of Monarch Industries, its windows reflecting the fading light of the day. One day, he thought, one day, they will all know the truth. And with that thought, Leonard walked away, his resolve stronger than ever. That Tuesday, Leonard walked into the building after his valet shift ended. He had changed out of his uniform, now wearing a plain but well-fitted suit, and he made his way to the elevator, blending seamlessly with the busy crowd of executives around him. No one paid him much attention, just another face in the sea of employees, another person navigating the labyrinth of Monarch Industries. But today was different. Today, they would all see who he really was. Leonard's footsteps were steady as he rode the elevator to the top floor. He watched as the numbers ticked upward, his heart pounding slightly but his resolve unwavering. This was it. This was the moment he had waited for, the moment to show the company exactly who he was. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Leonard stepped out, walking purposefully toward the boardroom. The senior management team was already gathered, busy preparing for the crucial quarterly review with Helena Carter, the CEO of Monarch Industries. The boardroom was a hive of activity. Assistants were arranging documents, executives were going over notes, and the air was thick with anticipation. Helena Carter was known for her strict demeanor and no-nonsense attitude, and no one wanted to make a mistake in her presence. Katie Green and her colleagues were among those bustling around the meeting room, placing documents, adjusting their presentations, and ensuring everything was perfect for the upcoming discussion. Katie, with her confident smile and air of superiority, moved around the table, her focus entirely on impressing the higher-ups. She didn't even glance in Leonard's direction as he entered the room. To her, he was invisible, just another nobody wandering where he didn't belong. But Leonard wasn't invisible to everyone. The moment Helena Carter spotted him, her eyes lit up with recognition, and she broke into an unexpected smile. "Leonard," she greeted warmly, her voice carrying across the boardroom, causing a ripple of silence to spread throughout the room. Everyone paused, turning to look at Helena, then at Leonard, confusion etched across their faces. Why was the CEO addressing the valet? Katie, who had been arranging a stack of presentation folders, froze in place, her expression one of disbelief. Helena gestured for Leonard to step forward, her smile never fading. "It's time, isn't it?" she said, her tone filled with a sense of importance that made the entire room hold its breath. Leonard nodded, his face calm as he walked confidently to the front of the room. He could feel the eyes of every executive on him, their shock palpable. Katie's face had drained of color, her confident demeanor crumbling as she watched the man she had taunted earlier that day take his place at the head of the boardroom table. Helena turned to face the rest of the room, her expression serious now. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you all to Monarch Industries' primary shareholder, Leonard Mitchell." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Whispers broke out among the executives, their faces a mix of astonishment, confusion, and, for some, panic. Katie's mouth fell open, her eyes widening as the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. The man she had mocked, the man she had treated like he was nothing, was the largest shareholder of the entire company. Leonard stood there, letting the moment sink in. He watched the faces of the people who had ignored him, dismissed him, and looked down on him for years. He saw the shock, the embarrassment, the dawning realization of who he truly was. And then he began to speak. "Thank you, Helena," Leonard said, his voice steady and commanding in a way that no one had ever heard before. He looked around the room, his gaze landing briefly on Katie before moving on. "I've been a part of Monarch Industries for many years now. Most of you know me, or at least you think you do. You've seen me in the parking lot, handling your cars, opening your doors. You assumed that was all there was to me." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "But what you didn't know," Leonard continued, his eyes narrowing slightly, "is that I have been watching, listening, and learning. I've seen the way this company operates, the way people are treated based on their titles and not their character. And I have to say, I'm disappointed." The room was deathly silent. No one dared to move, let alone speak. Katie looked like she wanted to disappear, her face flushed with embarrassment and fear. Leonard's gaze landed on her for a moment longer, and she swallowed hard, her confident facade shattered. Helena nodded, her expression one of approval. "Leonard has been an invaluable part of this company, far beyond what any of you realized," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "He has invested not only his money but his time, his effort, and his belief in what Monarch could be. And now, he's here to ensure that we live up to that potential." Leonard took a deep breath, his expression softening slightly. "I'm not here to point fingers or to punish anyone," he said. "I'm here because I believe in this company. I believe in what we can achieve if we work together, if we treat each other with respect and dignity, no matter what our roles are. Change is coming to Monarch Industries, and I intend to make sure it's the kind of change that benefits everyone, from the executives in this room to the employees who keep this place running every single day." He turned his attention back to Helena, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you, Leonard," she said, before addressing the rest of the room. "I expect each of you to take Leonard's words to heart. We have a responsibility, not just to our shareholders, but to every single person who works for Monarch. It's time we start acting like it." Katie felt her knees weaken as she lowered herself into a chair, her mind spinning. She replayed every word she had said to Leonard that morning, the mocking tone, the disdain in her voice. She had no idea. She had treated him like he was beneath her, and now, he was the one holding the power to shape the future of the company she worked for. Leonard gave one last look around the room, his gaze meeting the eyes of each executive. "I hope that moving forward, we can all learn to treat each other a little better," he said. "Not because of who might be watching, but because it's the right thing to do." With that, he stepped away from the head of the table, his point made. Helena took over the meeting, diving into the agenda for the quarterly review, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The executives listened intently, their focus sharper, their attitudes humbled by the revelation of who Leonard truly was. Katie sat silently, her face flushed as she scribbled notes, her mind still reeling. She had learned a harsh lesson today, a lesson about assumptions, about respect, and about the true value of the people around her. As she glanced up at Leonard, who had taken a seat at the back of the room, she knew that she would never look at him, or anyone else, the same way again. Leonard watched as the meeting continued, a sense of calm settling over him. He had done what he came here to do. He had revealed his true identity, not for revenge, but to make a point, to show that every person, no matter their role, deserved respect. And as he sat there, watching the executives finally understand, he knew that change was possible. The meeting eventually came to a close, and as the executives began to file out of the room, many of them paused to shake Leonard's hand, their faces filled with newfound respect. Katie approached him last, her expression a mix of embarrassment and sincerity. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual arrogance. Leonard gave her a small, understanding smile. "Just remember, Katie," he said gently, "you never know who someone really is, or what they're capable of. Treat everyone with respect. It's a lesson worth learning." Katie nodded, her eyes downcast. "I will," she promised. Leonard watched her walk away, and then turned to leave the boardroom himself. He felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Today was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. And as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew that Monarch Industries would never be the same again. Leonard stood in front of the stunned room, his eyes sweeping over the very people who had belittled him for years. The silence in the boardroom was deafening, as every executive, manager, and assistant stared at him, trying to reconcile the image of the man they had mocked as a valet with the powerful figure standing before them. "I've been at Monarch for over a decade," Leonard began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of authority that demanded attention. "I wasn't just parking cars. I was observing, watching how each of you treated your teams, how you handled your responsibilities, and how you treated people you deemed as beneath you. I may have been invisible to you, but I wasn't blind." He paused, allowing his words to settle in the air, watching as the realization slowly dawned on their faces. Katie squirmed in her seat, her confidence nowhere to be found. Her colleagues looked equally uncomfortable, and even the senior managers exchanged uneasy glances. Leonard continued, his tone growing firmer. "I've seen people dismissed, disrespected, and overlooked simply because they weren't wearing suits or because they didn't have impressive titles. But today, that changes. Today, I'm stepping out of the shadows." He turned his gaze directly to Katie, his eyes piercing through her. "Miss Green, you told me this morning to be careful with your car and threatened my job if I so much as scratched it. You mocked someone you knew nothing about, simply because I was wearing a valet uniform. That kind of attitude is exactly what's wrong with this company." Katie's face flushed red, her eyes darting around the room, hoping for support. But none of her colleagues would meet her gaze. They were too busy grappling with their own shame, recalling every time they had dismissed Leonard or anyone else they considered lesser. Leonard moved his attention across the room, his voice steady. I've seen how some of you make deals without thinking about the people those deals affect. I've watched as employees were pushed out, not because they lacked talent, but because they refused to play the political games that thrive in these walls. I've seen good people, hard-working people, treated as disposable because they didn't fit the image of what a successful employee should look like. Helena Carter, who had been standing to the side, stepped forward, her expression stern. I've supported Leonard from the beginning because I believe in his vision for this company. A vision built not on power and status, but on respect and integrity. And that's why we are making a change. Leonard nodded, grateful for Helena's support. He turned back to the room, his gaze softer now but no less intense. I don't want to see Monarch Industries fail. I want to see it succeed, not just in profits, but in the way it treats its people. Every single person in this building contributes to our success, from the executives making decisions to the janitors keeping our spaces clean. It's time we started acting like it. He could see some of the executives nodding slowly, their expressions thoughtful. He knew that not everyone in the room was malicious or arrogant. Some were simply blind to the culture that had taken root within the company. But today was about opening their eyes, about making them see the impact of their actions. Leonard continued, there's a saying that goes, a company's true measure is how it treats its lowest paid employees. Well, I've seen how we've been measuring up, and I'll be honest, it's not good enough. If we want to be leaders in our industry, we have to start by leading with empathy, with respect, and with the understanding that every role here matters. He looked at Helena, who gave him an encouraging nod. With Helena's support, we're going to implement changes, real changes, to how we operate. We'll be reviewing our policies on employee treatment, ensuring that everyone has a voice, that everyone is respected, regardless of their title or position. And yes, this includes comprehensive training on unconscious bias, because what I've seen here is a culture that needs a fundamental shift. Katie sank lower in her chair, her eyes downcast. She had always prided herself on being assertive, on knowing her place in the company hierarchy. But today, that hierarchy had been turned upside down, and she realized how little she truly knew. The sting of her earlier words to Leonard echoed in her mind, each one a reminder of her arrogance. Leonard turned his focus back to Katie, but his voice was kinder now. Katie, I don't say these things to embarrass you. I say them because you have potential, all of you do. But potential means nothing if it's used to tear others down instead of building them up. We can do better, and we will do better. Helena spoke again, her voice firm. Starting today, Leonard will be taking on an active role in shaping the future of Monarch Industries. His experience, his insight, and his unwavering belief in the value of every employee make him uniquely qualified to help us make the changes we need. Leonard took a step back, allowing Helena to address the team more directly. He could see the gears turning in the minds of the executives, the realization that the status quo was no longer acceptable. Helena outlined several initiatives that would be rolled out in the coming months, initiatives focused on transparency, fair treatment, and the elevation of all employees, not just those in the upper echelons of the company. As Helena spoke, Leonard glanced around the room, his eyes catching the gaze of one of the senior managers who had often ignored him. The man gave Leonard a nod, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and Leonard returned it. It was a start. A small one, perhaps, but a start nonetheless. When Helena finished, she turned to Leonard once more. Leonard, would you like to add anything else? Leonard stepped forward again, his eyes locking with the various executives around the table. I want you all to understand something, he said, his voice clear. I'm not here to tear anyone down or to seek revenge. I'm here because I care about this company, about the people who work here. I've seen the best and the worst of what we can be, and I believe we can be better. But it's going to take all of us, not just Helena, not just me, but every single one of you. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. If you're willing to work together, to change, to grow, then I promise you, we can make Monarch Industries a place we can all be proud of. But it starts with respect. It starts with seeing the value in everyone around you. Leonard stepped back, signaling that he was finished. Helena smiled at him, then addressed the room. Thank you, Leonard. Let's all take these words to heart and commit to making Monarch Industries a company that truly leads by example. The meeting concluded shortly after, and as the executives began to file out of the boardroom, Many of them paused to shake Leonard's hand, their expressions sincere. It was a far cry from the dismissive looks they had given him in the parking lot, and Leonard knew that, while change wouldn't happen overnight, today had been an important step. Katie approached him last, her expression a mix of embarrassment and sincerity. She hesitated before speaking, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry," she said, her eyes finally meeting his. "I didn't know. I shouldn't have treated you that way." Leonard gave her a small, understanding smile. "It's all right, Katie," he said gently. "Just remember, respect doesn't depend on what someone is wearing or what title they have. It's something everyone deserves, all the time." Katie nodded, her eyes downcast. "I understand. I'll do better." Leonard watched her walk away, then turned to leave the boardroom himself. He felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Today was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. And as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew that Monarch Industries would never be the same again. Leonard turned back to the rest of the room, his voice unwavering. "Effective immediately, Katie Green is dismissed. Monarch has no place for arrogance and disrespect toward any employee, no matter their role." The shock in the room was palpable. Katie opened her mouth to protest, but Helena raised a hand, her expression unyielding. "Katie, you've shown disregard not only for Leonard but for the very values we want to instill here. It's time you moved on." Katie slumped in her chair, her face pale and her eyes wide. The room seemed to hold its breath, everyone understanding that there was no arguing with either Helena or Leonard. The decision had been made, and it was final. Leonard continued, his eyes moving across the room, meeting those of each manager and executive. "This is a wake-up call. Monarch Industries will no longer be a place where people are judged by their titles. From now on, respect, collaboration, and integrity will define us." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "If anyone here believes they cannot embrace these values, I encourage you to leave now. We are not just restructuring our policies. We are redefining our culture. It starts today." There was a tense silence, and Leonard could see the unease in many of their eyes. Some of the executives shifted in their seats, their expressions a mix of fear and contemplation. Others nodded subtly, accepting the challenge that Leonard was putting before them. Helena stepped forward, her authoritative presence adding to Leonard's words. "Leonard is right. For too long, we've let arrogance and entitlement take root in our company. That ends now. I expect each of you to reflect on your behavior and make a conscious effort to contribute to a more respectful and supportive work environment. We will be better, but only if each of us commits to change." Leonard looked at Helena and gave her a small nod of appreciation. He then turned his attention back to the executives. "Over the next few weeks, we will be implementing new policies to ensure that every employee, regardless of their position, feels valued and heard. This includes mandatory workshops on unconscious bias, empathy and leadership, and the importance of recognizing the contributions of every team member." The room remained silent, but Leonard could see the shift in many of their faces. Some were beginning to understand the gravity of what was happening. They were realizing that the way things had always been was no longer acceptable. "I know change can be difficult," Leonard said, his tone softening slightly. "But I believe in this company. I believe in what we can achieve if we work together, if we support each other, and if we treat every person here with the dignity they deserve. We have the potential to be a leader in our industry, not just in terms of profits, but in terms of how we value our people." Helena nodded, stepping beside Leonard. "And for those of you who rise to meet this challenge, there will be opportunities for growth. We want leaders who inspire, who uplift those around them, not leaders who thrive on power dynamics and intimidation. The changes we are making are not just about compliance. They are about transformation." Leonard could feel a sense of resolution settling over the room. The weight of the changes they were about to undertake was heavy, but there was also a sense of hope. Hope that Monarch Industries could become a company that truly valued every person within its walls. He looked at Katie one last time. She was still seated, her face downcast. Leonard took a deep breath and addressed her directly, his voice filled with a mix of sternness and compassion. "Katie, I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect. The world is full of second chances, but they only matter if we learn from our mistakes. I wish you the best, and I hope you grow from this." Katie nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She stood up slowly, glancing around the room before making her way to the door. No one spoke, and the silence was heavy as she left. Once the door closed behind her, Leonard looked back at the remaining executives. Let today be the start of something new. Let it be the day we chose to become better, not just for ourselves but for everyone who works at Monarch. The executives exchanged glances, and Leonard could see some of them nodding, their expressions determined. He knew that not everyone would adapt easily, and that some might choose to leave rather than embrace the new culture. But he also knew that those who stayed would be part of something better, a company that valued respect and integrity above all else. Helena stepped forward once more, her voice carrying a note of finality. This meeting is adjourned. I want each of you to take the rest of the day to reflect on what's been said here. Tomorrow, we begin the real work of building a better Monarch Industries. As the executives began to gather their things and leave the boardroom, many of them approached Leonard, offering handshakes and words of commitment to the new direction of the company. Leonard accepted each one with a nod, knowing that actions, not words, would ultimately determine the success of this transformation. Once the room had mostly cleared, Helena turned to Leonard, her expression softening. "You did well today," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "This is the start of something important." Leonard gave her a small smile, the tension finally beginning to leave his shoulders. "Thank you, Helena. I couldn't have done it without your support." Helena nodded. "We're in this together. And I have no doubt that, with your leadership, we're going to turn this company into something truly remarkable." Leonard took a deep breath, looking out the window at the city skyline. There was still so much work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Today was just the beginning, a first step toward creating a workplace that valued every individual, that recognized the importance of respect, integrity, and collaboration. And as he stood there, watching the sun set over the city, Leonard knew that this was the legacy he wanted to leave behind. A company that was better, kinder, and stronger because it valued people above all else. After Katie was escorted out, Leonard turned his attention to the remaining employees, his expression calm but resolute. He took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady and filled with purpose. "I'm not here to punish, I'm here to rebuild. To create a workplace where everyone, from the janitor to the CEO, is valued. Where no one is invisible, and everyone has the opportunity to succeed." The room was silent, the tension palpable as Leonard's words settled over the group. He could see a mixture of fear, uncertainty, and curiosity in their eyes. Some of the employees exchanged glances, while others simply looked down, lost in thought. Helena stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Leonard and I have been working together for years on this transformation. He's been quietly buying shares, waiting for the right moment to step in and make a difference. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Monarch Industries, a chapter defined by respect, integrity, and genuine leadership." Leonard nodded, glancing at Helena before turning back to the group. His eyes softened slightly as he continued. "I understand that change can be hard. It's uncomfortable, and it forces us to confront parts of ourselves we may not like. But it's necessary. If you're willing to work with us, to embrace this new culture, you will have a place here. If not, there's the door." He gestured to the door, his meaning unmistakable. There was no room for ambiguity. This was a turning point for everyone in the room. Leonard knew that the culture at Monarch needed a complete overhaul, and that meant starting with those who were willing to be part of the solution. "This isn't about fear or intimidation," Leonard added, his voice softer now. "It's about growth. It's about becoming the kind of company we can all be proud of, where people come to work feeling respected, feeling like their contributions matter. I've seen the best of what people can do when they're treated with dignity. And I want each of you to be a part of that future." A murmur ran through the room. Some of the executives nodded, their faces thoughtful. Others remained quiet, clearly processing what had just transpired. Leonard could sense the unease, but he also saw hope, a glimmer of possibility that things could be different, better. Helena looked around the room, her eyes sharp. "The changes we're implementing are not optional. We're redefining what it means to work at Monarch. We're tearing down the old structures that allowed disrespect and entitlement to flourish, and we're building something stronger in its place. This is your opportunity to be part of that change." Leonard took a step forward, his gaze steady as he met the eyes of each person in the room. "We'll be implementing new initiatives, Training programs focused on empathy, collaboration, and recognizing the value of every role. We'll be listening to the voices that have been ignored for too long. And we'll be holding each other accountable, starting with myself and Helena. This is a journey, and it won't be easy. But I promise you, it will be worth it. The room remained silent, but the atmosphere had shifted. The initial shock and fear were beginning to give way to something else, determination. Leonard could see it in their faces, the recognition that this was an opportunity to be part of something meaningful. One of the senior managers, a man named Richard who had often kept to himself, raised his hand tentatively. "Leonard," he began, his voice hesitant, I want to be a part of this. I know I haven't always been the most approachable or the most open-minded, but I want to change. I want to help make this company better." Leonard gave Richard a nod, a small smile forming on his lips. "Thank you, Richard. That's exactly what we need. People who are willing to look inward, to recognize where they can improve, and to take action. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress." Helena stepped forward, her expression softening as she looked around the room. "I know many of you have questions, concerns, even fears about what comes next. But I want you to know that Leonard and I are committed to this journey. We will be transparent, we will listen, and we will work alongside you every step of the way." Leonard turned his attention to the rest of the group. "This is not just about a new set of rules or policies. It's about a mindset shift. It's about treating every person here, no matter their role, with the respect they deserve. If we can do that, if we can build a culture of empathy and understanding, there's no limit to what we can achieve." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I'm asking each of you to make a choice today. Choose to be part of this new era. Choose to be a leader, not just in title, but in action. Because true leadership is not about power or control. It's about lifting others up, about creating an environment where everyone can thrive." Helena nodded, her eyes meeting Leonard's. "This is a new era for Monarch Industries, and it starts today. We're committed to making this a place where everyone is valued, where innovation and respect go hand in hand, and where every employee, regardless of title, feels like they belong." Leonard looked around the room one last time, taking in the faces of the people who would help shape the future of the company. "If you're ready to be part of that journey, we're ready to have you. Let's make Monarch Industries a place we can all be proud of." With that, Leonard stepped back, his eyes meeting those of his colleagues. There was a moment of silence, followed by a ripple of nods and a few murmurs of agreement. The weight of the past was still present, but the hope for the future was undeniable. Helena smiled, her voice gentle but firm as she spoke. "Let's get to work." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was unmistakable. Over the next few weeks, Monarch Industries went through a complete overhaul. Training sessions focused on emotional intelligence, diversity, and respect were mandatory for all employees. Hierarchies became less rigid, and collaboration was encouraged across all levels of the company. Helena and Leonard worked side by side, ensuring that the changes were implemented effectively. They spoke with employees at every level, listening to their concerns and suggestions. Helena's stern but fair demeanor and Leonard's approachable nature created a strong partnership that inspired others to embrace the new direction Monarch Industries was taking. Emma Reed, a young assistant who had always kept her head down, suddenly found herself being asked for her input. She was amazed by the shift in dynamics. Emma had witnessed how Leonard was treated in the garage, and now she saw him in a new light, not just as a leader, but as someone who genuinely cared about making Monarch better. The executives who once ignored her now listened to her ideas, and she began to believe that she could truly make a difference. One day, Leonard called a meeting with all staff members, from executives to janitors. The large conference room was filled with employees of all levels, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Standing at the front of the room, Leonard addressed them, his voice full of conviction. "We've all been through a lot of changes lately," Leonard began, his eyes moving across the room, meeting the gaze of each person who had come to hear him speak. "But these changes are only the beginning. Monarch Industries will become a company that values people first. We will thrive, not just because of profits, but because every single person here feels valued and respected." There was a murmur of agreement throughout the room, and Leonard continued. "We're creating a culture where collaboration and respect are at the core of everything we do. From the executives making strategic decisions to the maintenance staff who keep our facilities running smoothly, everyone here plays a vital role. No role is more important than another, and it's time we all truly understand that. Leonard paused for a moment, allowing his words to resonate. He then looked directly at the janitorial staff who were seated at the back of the room. I want to thank each and every one of you for your hard work. Too often, your contributions are overlooked, but I see you, and I appreciate you. Without you, this company would not be able to function. A janitor named Miguel, who had been with the company for over 15 years, felt a lump form in his throat. No one in leadership had ever acknowledged him or his team in such a direct and genuine way. He nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. Helena stepped forward, her expression warm. We're also committed to making sure that our growth is shared. We're implementing new programs that will allow for skill development, mentorship opportunities, and career advancement for every single person in this company. If you have ambitions, we want to help you achieve them, whether that means taking on new responsibilities, learning new skills, or even shifting to a different department where you feel your talents will shine. Emma felt a rush of excitement. She had always wanted to move into project management, but she never thought she'd have the chance. For the first time, she felt like it might actually be possible. The atmosphere in the room shifted from one of anticipation to one of genuine optimism. Leonard could see it on their faces. People who had been coming to work simply to get through the day now looked hopeful, energized. They believed in what Monarch could become, and they were ready to be part of the transformation. Leonard continued, "The culture we're building here isn't just about our work. It's about how we treat each other as human beings. It's about ensuring that everyone feels heard, respected, and valued. We are going to celebrate our successes together, but we're also going to learn from our mistakes, and we're going to do it with humility and respect for one another." Helena nodded, adding, "We want Monarch Industries to be a model for what a modern, ethical company can look like. A company that leads not only in innovation and profit, but also in the way we treat our employees, our partners, and our community." There was a round of applause, and Leonard smiled, his eyes shining with determination. "I know that change can be uncomfortable, and I know that some of you may be unsure about the future. But I promise you, if we work together, if we stay committed to these values, we will create something incredible. We will build a future that we can all be proud of." After the meeting, employees stayed behind to talk, their conversations buzzing with excitement. Leonard moved through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to feedback, and answering questions. He made sure to connect with everyone, regardless of their position. Emma approached Leonard, her voice nervous but filled with hope. "Mr. Mitchell, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been here for 2 years, and I never thought I'd see a day like this. I've always wanted to move into project management, but I didn't think it was possible for someone like me." Leonard smiled warmly. "Emma, I've seen your work, and I know you have the potential to do great things. If project management is where your passion lies, then let's make it happen. We're going to set up mentorship programs, and I'd be more than happy to help guide you in any way I can." Emma's eyes lit up, and she nodded eagerly. "Thank you so much. That means the world to me." Leonard watched her walk away, a smile on his face. He knew that empowering people like Emma was what this transformation was all about. It wasn't about him. It was about giving every individual at Monarch the chance to grow, to thrive, and to contribute in meaningful ways. In the following weeks, the atmosphere at Monarch Industries continued to evolve. The training sessions were well attended, and employees were engaged, eager to learn how they could be part of the new culture. The changes didn't just stay within the walls of the company. They began to spill out into the community as well. Monarch Industries partnered with local organizations to provide mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, focusing on career development and skill building. Employees were encouraged to volunteer, and many did so with enthusiasm, proud to be part of a company that genuinely cared about making a difference beyond its own walls. Miguel, the janitor who had been acknowledged by Leonard during the staff meeting, found himself part of a new leadership development program. He had always been good at organizing teams and managing schedules, but no one had ever noticed before. Now, he was being trained to take on a supervisory role, something he had never dreamed possible. One day, as he was walking through the hallway, he ran into Leonard. "Mr. Mitchell," Miguel began, "I just wanted to thank you. I never thought I'd have a chance to do more than just clean these halls. But now, I'm part of something bigger, and it means a lot to me." Leonard shook his hand firmly. "Miguel, you've always been part of something bigger. It just took us too long to recognize it. I'm glad you're getting the opportunities you deserve. Miguel smiled, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about a new role. It was about knowing that he was seen, that his work mattered, and that he had a future at Monarch Industries. As the months went by, the changes at Monarch Industries became more apparent. The company's reputation began to shift. Word spread about the transformation taking place, and soon, people were reaching out, wanting to be part of a company that valued its employees so deeply. Job applications increased, and the quality of applicants improved. People wanted to work at Monarch because it was becoming a symbol of what a workplace should be: respectful, inclusive, and empowering. Helena and Leonard often reflected on how far they had come. One evening, after a particularly long day, they stood by the large window in Helena's office, looking out over the city. "We've still got a long way to go," Helena said, her voice thoughtful. "But I think we're on the right path." Leonard nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "We are. And we're not doing it alone. The people here, they're incredible. They just needed a chance to show it." Helena looked at him, her eyes filled with appreciation. "You believed in them, Leonard. And now they believe in themselves. That's how real change happens." Leonard felt a swell of pride. This was the legacy he wanted to leave, not just profits and success, but a company where every person felt valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. Monarch Industries was finally becoming the kind of place he had always dreamed it could be, a future built on respect, where everyone had the chance to thrive. The story of Leonard's rise quickly spread across the city. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon it went viral. People were touched by the humility and strength of a man who had once been dismissed as a mere valet but turned out to be the true force behind the company. Leonard's journey from the parking lot to the boardroom resonated with many, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of respect and dignity for every individual, regardless of their role. Monarch Industries became a symbol of transformation, a place where people were proud to work. The company's new policies of inclusiveness and respect attracted attention from industry leaders and competitors. Other companies, inspired by Monarch's example, began evaluating their own corporate cultures. CEOs and business owners across the region took a hard look at how they treated their employees and whether they truly valued every member of their teams. Leonard's story became a catalyst for broader change, sparking conversations about workplace respect and the value of each employee. Leonard himself received numerous invitations to speak at business conferences, community events, and universities. People wanted to hear from the man who had helped turn a struggling company into a beacon of positive change. Leonard used these opportunities to share his story, not for personal recognition, but to inspire others. He spoke of the importance of humility, of treating every person with dignity, and of the incredible potential that could be unleashed when people were given the respect they deserved. Back at Monarch Industries, the changes continued to take root. Employees who had once kept their heads down, like Emma and Miguel, were thriving in their new roles. The company's focus on mentorship and skill development opened doors for employees at all levels, and the atmosphere was one of collaboration and shared purpose. There was a renewed sense of energy, a feeling that they were all part of something bigger than themselves, a movement towards a workplace that was fair, supportive, and empowering. The ripple effect extended beyond the workplace. Monarch's commitment to the community became more evident as they partnered with local organizations to provide career training and mentorship programs for young people. The company's employees volunteered their time, eager to contribute to the positive changes taking place. Monarch Industries was no longer just a business. It had become a force for good in the community. Leonard often reflected on how far they had come. He knew that the journey was far from over, but the progress they had made was undeniable. Monarch Industries had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose to lead with respect, integrity, and compassion. And as more and more companies began to follow in their footsteps, Leonard felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The transformation at Monarch was not just about profits and growth. It was about changing lives, creating opportunities, and building a future where everyone had the chance to succeed. Months later, Leonard took his usual spot in the parking garage, but this time not as a valet. He was checking in on his team, making sure everyone had what they needed and felt respected. The familiar hum of engines and the scent of fresh oil filled the air, but now, Leonard's presence carried a different weight. He walked with confidence, his gaze meeting each of his colleagues with a smile and a nod of appreciation. The team members greeted him warmly, no longer seeing him as an invisible worker, but as a leader who had always valued their contributions. Emma Reed, now promoted to a project coordinator, stood beside Leonard, chatting about upcoming projects. She had come a long way from the assistant who once kept her head down. The opportunities she had received at Monarch had allowed her to flourish, and she was eager to contribute to the company's future. Emma spoke passionately about a new initiative to streamline workflow across departments, her enthusiasm evident. Leonard listened intently, offering words of encouragement and suggestions for improvement. He loved seeing people grow, and Emma was a testament to what could be achieved when employees were empowered. Helena Carter watched from the lobby, a smile playing on her lips. She observed the changes that had taken place, the way employees interacted, the openness and camaraderie that now defined the culture of Monarch Industries. This was the company she had always dreamed of leading, a place not just focused on financial growth, but on people, values, and community. She knew they still had challenges ahead, but she also knew they had built a strong foundation that could withstand whatever the future brought. Leonard looked across the parking lot, taking in the scene. The sight of his team, valets, managers, assistants, and executives, moving seamlessly together filled him with a deep sense of pride. They were no longer divided by titles or uniforms. They were united by a shared purpose. Monarch Industries was no longer just a company. It was a community, one that valued every individual for who they were and what they brought to the table. He knew the journey was far from over. Change was an ongoing process, and there would always be more work to be done. But Leonard also knew that they were on the right path. They had come so far, and the spirit of respect and integrity that now defined Monarch was something that would continue to grow. He had once stood in that very parking lot, dismissed as just a valet. Now, he stood there as a leader, knowing that the company had transformed for the better, all because he refused to let others define his worth. Leonard turned back to Emma, who was still animatedly discussing her ideas. He smiled. "Let's get to work," he said, and together, they walked towards the building, ready to continue building a future that was truly worthy of everyone at Monarch Industries.